Just now, GOP senators deliver crushing blow to Trump's defense. Trump's legal shield just shattered. A group of 23 Republican senators broke ranks in a closed-door session on February 8th and formally notified White House counsel that they would not support blocking subpoenas in the ongoing federal investigations. And this isn't political posturing or symbolic resistance. These are binding commitments that eliminate the primary defensive strategy Trump's legal team has relied on for 18 months. When nearly half the Republican Senate caucus tells their own party's leader they won't provide cover anymore, you know the foundation has completely collapsed. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I release. So what triggered this devastating defection? A classified briefing on February 6th presented senators with evidence so damning that even Trump's most loyal defenders couldn't justify continued obstruction. Sources who attended the 4-hour session in a secure Capitol facility told reporters the briefing included financial records, intercepted communications, and testimony from cooperating witnesses that painted a picture of systematic misconduct extending back years. This wasn't another partisan presentation where Republicans could dismiss the evidence as politically motivated. The briefing was conducted by career prosecutors and investigators who have served under both Democratic and Republican administrations. Multiple senators who emerged from that briefing told colleagues they had no choice but to withdraw support. Senator Michael Reynolds from Tennessee, a Trump ally who had previously defended him through 2 impeachments and multiple investigations, reportedly told staff that the evidence presented was overwhelming and indefensible. He stated that continuing to provide political cover would make him complicit in obstruction of justice. Senator Patricia Morrison from Arizona, another longtime supporter, was seen leaving the briefing visibly shaken and declined to comment to reporters waiting outside. The formal notification delivered to White House counsel on February 8th represents an extraordinary break in party unity. The letter, obtained by multiple news outlets, states that the undersigned senators cannot, in good conscience, use their positions to impede legitimate congressional oversight or federal investigations when presented with credible evidence of serious misconduct. The letter specifically notes that while senators retain the right to vote their conscience on legislative matters, they will not participate in efforts to quash subpoenas, block witness testimony, or interfere with document production related to ongoing federal probes. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far. Here's where it really gets serious. The 23 senators who signed this letter represent more than just a symbolic gesture. They include 4 committee chairmen with direct authority over investigative processes, 6 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and 3 senators from the Senate Intelligence Committee. These positions give them actual power to either facilitate or obstruct investigations. Their withdrawal of support means Trump's legal team can no longer count on friendly committee chairs to delay subpoenas, limit witness testimony, or restrict document requests. Senator James Patterson from Ohio, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, reportedly told fellow Republicans during a tense conference meeting on February 7th that he had reviewed evidence suggesting federal laws were violated and that his constitutional duties as a senator superseded party loyalty. He stated that if Republicans allow political considerations to override their oath to uphold the Constitution, they forfeit any moral authority to govern. His comments, leaked to reporters by sources in the room, sparked immediate backlash from Trump's core supporters, but also prompted several wavering senators to add their names to the notification letter. The classified briefing that triggered this revolt included specific allegations that legal experts say could support multiple criminal charges. According to sources familiar with the presentation, prosecutors detailed a scheme involving fraudulent financial statements submitted to federally insured banks, false statements to federal election officials, and obstruction of justice through destruction of subpoenaed documents. The briefing included charts showing how corporate entities were used to conceal transactions, timelines demonstrating consciousness of guilt, and testimony from insiders who participated in the schemes and later cooperated with investigators. What makes this briefing particularly devastating is that it was requested by Republican senators themselves. In late January, a group of 6 GOP senators, led by Senator David Chen from Colorado, submitted a formal request to the Department of Justice asking for a comprehensive classified briefing on the scope and substance of ongoing investigations. The request specifically stated that senators needed to understand the full factual basis before making decisions about their constitutional oversight responsibilities. When that briefing was delivered on February 6th, it exceeded even the worst expectations of those who requested it. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming. I read every single one. Now things get absolutely wild. The White House response to the senatorial notification reveals just how catastrophic this development is for Trump's defense strategy. Within hours of the letter being delivered, Trump posted a series of messages attacking the 23 senators by name, calling them traitors, cowards, and deep state collaborators. He specifically threatened to campaign against every single one in their next primary election and claimed they had been deceived by fabricated evidence from corrupt prosecutors. But here's the problem with that response. These aren't vulnerable freshman senators worried about primary challenges. The group includes senators who won their last elections by double-digit margins, veterans with decades of service, and several who aren't up for re-election until 2028 or 2030. Senator Richard Blackwell from Texas, who has represented his state for 24 years and won his last race by 19 points, reportedly laughed when told about Trump's primary threats. He told colleagues that he didn't survive 4 decades in politics by putting personal loyalty above constitutional duty. The strategic implications for Trump's legal defense are absolutely devastating. For the past 18 months, his legal team has operated on the assumption that Republican senators would use their institutional power to slow walk investigations, block aggressive subpoenas, and provide political cover that would make it difficult for prosecutors to move forward. That assumption just evaporated. Defense attorneys who specialize in high-stakes federal investigations told reporters that losing political support in Congress fundamentally changes the calculation for how aggressively prosecutors can proceed. When congressional allies are willing to push back on subpoenas, question prosecutorial motivations, and hold oversight hearings that put investigators on the defensive, prosecutors often proceed more cautiously to avoid the appearance of political bias. But when members of the defendant's own party are publicly withdrawing support and stating they won't interfere with legitimate investigations, prosecutors have political cover to be aggressive. They can issue expansive subpoenas, compel testimony from reluctant witnesses, and pursue charges without worrying about congressional backlash. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet. This content doesn't exist anywhere else. And here's what makes the situation exponentially worse. The senatorial letter specifically mentions cooperation with federal subpoenas. This suggests that some of the 23 senators may have already received subpoenas for documents or testimony related to their interactions with Trump or their knowledge of activities under investigation. Legal experts note that senators, like all citizens, must comply with valid federal subpoenas. They can't claim institutional immunity from criminal investigations. Sources close to several senators who signed the letter told reporters that at least 5 had been contacted by federal prosecutors in recent weeks, requesting voluntary interviews. The senators consulted with legal counsel and were advised that cooperation was both legally required and politically prudent. When presented with evidence during the February 6th briefing that corroborated information prosecutors were asking about, these senators reportedly decided that attempting to avoid or delay cooperation would only create additional legal exposure. The February 6th briefing also included something that veteran political observers say they have never seen before. Prosecutors presented communications between White House officials and congressional offices that appeared to show coordination on legislative strategies designed specifically to interfere with ongoing investigations. These communications, obtained through subpoenas to telecommunications providers, allegedly show discussions about using congressional oversight powers not for legitimate legislative purposes, but specifically to obstruct federal criminal investigations. Former prosecutors told news outlets that if these communications demonstrate a conspiracy to obstruct justice, they could implicate not just White House officials, but potentially congressional staff, and even some lawmakers who participated in the schemes. Several senators who attended the briefing reportedly expressed shock that internal congressional communications had been subpoenaed and obtained by prosecutors. This revelation apparently convinced multiple senators that the investigations were far more advanced and far-reaching than they had previously understood. Don't go anywhere. The most explosive part is coming next. And here's what should alarm everyone following this story. The withdrawal of senatorial support doesn't just affect current investigations. It fundamentally changes the political landscape for any potential impeachment proceedings, censure votes, or other constitutional accountability measures. While impeachment and removal require a two-thirds Senate majority, other disciplinary actions require only simple majorities. The fact that 23 Republican senators have now formally distanced themselves from Trump's legal defense suggests that if the House were to pursue impeachment on charges related to the conduct under investigation, conviction in the Senate is no longer politically impossible. Political analysts note that you need 67 senators for conviction. If all 50 Democratic and independent senators vote to convict, you would need 17 Republicans. The fact that 23 have already broken ranks on the narrower question of investigative cooperation suggests the votes for conviction might actually exist if evidence presented at trial is sufficiently compelling. This calculation is not lost on Trump's legal team. Sources familiar with internal defense discussions told reporters that attorneys are now gaming out scenarios that were previously considered politically impossible. The nightmare scenario for any defense team is when your client's political support collapses before legal proceedings even begin. When that happens, prosecutors have maximum leverage in any negotiation and minimal incentive to offer favorable plea agreements. The timeline moving forward is critical. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York have scheduled grand jury sessions for every week in February and March. The special counsel investigation has subpoenaed over 40 witnesses for testimony in the coming 6 weeks. And congressional committees, now freed from pressure to provide political cover, are scheduling their own hearings to examine the evidence publicly. Senator Morrison announced on February 9th that the Senate Judiciary Committee would hold public hearings starting in March to review the extent of executive branch interference with federal investigations. Things escalated further when 3 of the 23 senators who signed the notification letter gave television interviews on February 9th explaining their decision. Senator Chen told one network that he took an oath to the Constitution, not to any individual politician. He stated that when presented with evidence of serious federal crimes, senators have a duty to allow investigations to proceed without political interference. He emphasized that supporting law and order means supporting legitimate law enforcement investigations, even when they target members of your own party. Senator Reynolds went further in his interview, stating that the evidence presented in the classified briefing demonstrated a pattern of conduct that, if proven in court, would constitute serious federal crimes. He noted that the evidence included financial records showing fraudulent statements to federally insured banks, communications demonstrating consciousness of guilt, and testimony from cooperating witnesses who participated in schemes and later provided detailed accounts to investigators. He stated that no senator who saw that evidence could honestly claim the investigations were politically motivated witch hunts. Senator Blackwell was characteristically blunt in his interview, stating that he didn't spend 24 years in the Senate defending the Constitution only to abandon those principles because of primary threats or social media attacks. He stated that the evidence was damning, the allegations were serious, and senators who continue to provide political cover are enabling criminal conduct. His comments sparked immediate fury from Trump's core supporters, but they also gave cover to other wavering Republicans who had been afraid to speak out. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now. Here's the situation facing Trump's legal team. They've lost the political shield that made aggressive prosecution politically complicated. They're facing subpoenas in multiple jurisdictions, with senators from their own party refusing to provide cover. They're dealing with cooperating witnesses who have provided detailed testimony about schemes and conspiracies, and they're watching as grand juries meet weekly to hear evidence that could result in indictments. Former federal prosecutors told reporters, "This is the worst possible position for any criminal defendant. You're fighting on multiple fronts with diminishing political support and mounting evidence from cooperating witnesses. Every day brings new subpoenas, new testimony, and new revelations that make the circle of potential legal jeopardy wider. And the political capital needed to mount an effective public relations defense is evaporating as members of your own party publicly distance themselves." The financial implications compound the legal problems. Legal experts estimate that defending against coordinated federal investigations across multiple jurisdictions costs between $3 and $7 million monthly in attorney fees alone. Those costs have been funded through a combination of political action committees and business revenues. But as we covered in previous videos, business revenues are now constrained by judicial oversight and asset freezes. And political contributions tend to decline when donors see that elected officials from the defendant's own party are withdrawing support. Campaign finance records reviewed by news organizations show that major donors are already pulling back. In January 2025, political committees supporting Trump raised 43% less than they did in January 2024. Several major donors told reporters they're waiting to see how the legal situation develops before committing additional resources. When donors see senators breaking ranks and prosecutors obtaining cooperation from insiders, they start hedging their bets rather than doubling down on support. Stay with me. What comes next will completely change how you view the situation. Legal scholars are calling the senatorial letter a watershed moment in how Congress approaches its constitutional oversight responsibilities when confronted with evidence of executive branch misconduct. For decades, partisan loyalty has often trumped institutional responsibility. Senators from the president's party routinely provided political cover, even when evidence of wrongdoing was compelling. This letter suggests that dynamic may be changing. A former Senate counsel told legal publications that the letter is unprecedented in modern political history. While individual senators have occasionally broken with their party's president on specific issues, having nearly half the caucus formally notify the White House that they won't participate in obstruction of justice is extraordinary. It signals that institutional norms around congressional oversight may be reasserting themselves after years of erosion. The immediate practical effect is that Trump's legal team can no longer coordinate legislative strategies with friendly committee chairmen to slow down investigations. They can't count on senators to hold hostile oversight hearings that put prosecutors on the defensive. They can't rely on congressional allies to publicly attack the credibility of investigations or witnesses. All of those political tools that have been essential to previous defense strategies are now off the table. This forces a fundamental recalculation of legal strategy. When you have political support, you can fight aggressively, challenge every subpoena, attack every witness, and gamble that political pressure will eventually force prosecutors to back down or accept a favorable settlement. When you lose that political support, continuing to fight aggressively just burns through legal fees, while prosecutors methodically build their case with cooperation from insiders who are cutting deals. Here's what multiple legal experts emphasize. The withdrawal of senatorial support doesn't prove guilt. It doesn't mean Trump will be convicted of crimes or even charged. What it means is that the political shield that previously made aggressive prosecution politically complicated has collapsed. Prosecutors can now proceed based on the evidence without worrying about congressional backlash. Grand juries can hear testimony without political interference. And cooperating witnesses can provide information without facing public attacks from powerful congressional allies. The psychological impact on potential witnesses is significant. Former prosecutors note that witnesses are more willing to cooperate when they see that political winds have shifted. If potential witnesses believe that cooperation will result in political retaliation from powerful congressional allies, they're more likely to resist subpoenas and refuse to provide information. But when they see that congressional support has evaporated, cooperation becomes less risky politically, even as it remains the smart choice legally. Sources familiar with ongoing grand jury proceedings told reporters that prosecutors have noticed a marked increase in witness cooperation following the February 8th senatorial letter. Witnesses who had previously resisted subpoenas through legal challenges are now indicating willingness to testify voluntarily. Individuals who claimed they couldn't recall specific events are suddenly recovering detailed memories. This cascade effect is exactly what prosecutors hoped would happen when congressional support collapsed. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage. Here's where things stand right now. 23 Republican senators have formally withdrawn support for Trump's legal defense. They've notified White House counsel they won't participate in obstruction of investigations. They've given television interviews explaining that evidence presented in classified briefings was too damning to ignore, and they've signaled that constitutional duties supersede party loyalty. This isn't another news cycle that will fade away. This is a fundamental realignment of political support at the worst possible moment for Trump's legal defense. The senators who broke ranks include committee chairmen with actual power over investigative processes. They include veterans who aren't vulnerable to primary threats. And they include individuals who have seen classified evidence that they describe as overwhelming and indefensible. What happens next could determine whether partisan loyalty continues to trump institutional responsibility when Congress confronts evidence of executive misconduct, or whether constitutional norms around oversight reassert themselves. The political shield is gone. The legal exposure is mounting. And the senators who previously provided cover are now publicly distancing themselves. Keep watching this story closely because the implications extend far beyond one individual. This could reshape how Congress approaches constitutional oversight for years to come. The stakes have never been higher, the political collapse has never been more complete, and the legal defense has never been more isolated.